It's fun to skip with your Whammo hula hoop. Throw it away and it boomerangs right back.
Choose tennis or hockey, handball.
Dial each numeral in this manner.
Growing up poor in the 1970s wasn't just a struggle. It was an experience that shaped resilience, creativity, and a deep appreciation for the little things. From hand-me-down clothes and patched-up shoes to making the most of every meal, kids who grew up with less learned the true meaning of resourcefulness. Whether it was fixing broken toys with tape or turning chores into games, these memories built character. If you lived it, you'd know. Being broke didn't mean being broken. So join us as we explore 25 things only kids who grew up poor in the 1970s remember.
Spokesmen for the May Company say that they are beginning to get returns of the pet rock. That one woman who bought one of these brought it back saying it was moving in the box when she bought it.
For kids growing up poor in the 70s, trends like pet rocks were both a dream and a frustration. While wealthier classmates excitedly showed off their smooth little stones in cardboard boxes with breathing holes, poor kids had to get creative. Many would search for their own pet in the backyard, wash it off, and draw a face on it with a marker. Begging parents for $4 to buy what was essentially a rock often led to a firm no. After all, that money could buy real necessities. Still, the desire to fit in was strong, and some kids found ways to trade, borrow, or even make their own versions. The pet rock craze was fun, but for those with tight budgets, it was just another reminder of what they couldn't afford. If kids could convince their parents to buy them a rock and treat it like a pet, what other pop culture phenomenon had them completely rethinking their surroundings, especially when it came to the ocean?
Horrific! But suppose it's over 3 hours. Relax. Panasonic VHS tapes up to 4 hours of sports, movie specials on one cassette.
Entertainment often came from borrowed VHS tapes, Saturday night TV, or catching a movie at a friend's house. When Jaws hit the screens in 1975, it didn't just terrify audiences. It created a generation of kids too scared to step into the ocean. The fear was even worse for those who rarely got beach trips. The ocean was already an unfamiliar, mysterious place, and Jaws made it seem like certain death lurked beneath the waves. Even swimming in lakes or deep pools felt risky, with imaginations running wild. Poor kids who couldn't afford fancy vacations didn't mind skipping the beach. After all, staying on land felt a lot safer after Spielberg's masterpiece of terror.
Is the subject of our tale, and the predicate tells what Mr. Morton must.
Expensive tutors or fancy educational toys weren't an option. So, Schoolhouse Rock became an unexpected classroom at home. These short, animated segments aired between Saturday morning cartoons, teaching everything from math and grammar to civics and history through catchy songs. Conjunction Junction made grammar fun, while 3 is a magic number turned multiplication into music. Without realizing it, kids absorbed lessons that stuck for life. Since books were sometimes a luxury, these mini lessons filled in educational gaps in an entertaining way. Parents loved them because they were free, and kids enjoyed them because they were fun. Schoolhouse Rock was the ultimate learning hack for kids with limited resources in a world without internet or streaming.
Yes, we're going to eat worms. I betcha.
Saturday morning cartoons were a sacred ritual, one of the few luxuries that didn't cost a dime. With no cable, streaming, or on-demand TV, this was the one chance to catch favorites like Scooby-Doo, the Smurfs, and Fat Albert. Kids would wake up before sunrise, pour a bowl of generic brand cereal, and park themselves in front of the family's old, sometimes finicky television. Adjusting rabbit ear antennas or giving the TV a smack to fix the static was all part of the experience. These animated adventures provided an escape from everyday struggles, transporting kids into colorful worlds of mystery, humor, and fun. By noon, the magic was over, and reality, chores, errands, and hand-me-down clothes came rushing back. While kids lounged in front of their favorite cartoons, what fashion trend was taking over, often pulled all the way up to their knees? For kids growing up poor in the 1970s, tube socks weren't just a fashion statement. They were a necessity, often bought in bulk because they were cheap and durable. These knee-high socks, usually white with bold stripes in red, blue, or yellow, were worn with everything shorts, skirts, and even hand-me-down sneakers that had seen better days. Since new clothes were a rare treat, tube socks were an easy way to add some style to an otherwise worn-out wardrobe. Holes were inevitable, but that didn't mean throwing them away. Resourceful parents simply darned them or had kids wear mismatched pairs until they completely fell apart. Whether playing outside, riding bikes, or heading to school, those striped socks were a signature look of the era.
Radio Shack has a super half-price deal now on an 8-track car stereo tape player. Regularly $59.95, now just $29.95.
Owning an 8-track player felt like having a piece of modern technology. Clunky, unreliable, but still magical. These bulky cartridges, often handed down from older siblings or bought secondhand, blasted everything from disco to rock with a signature ka-chunk sound between the tracks. There was no rewinding, so if you missed your favorite song, you had to wait for the loop to come back around. Poor kids often had a limited selection, whatever albums their parents or relatives could afford. So they played the same tapes repeatedly until the sound warped. Despite their flaws, 8 tracks were a gateway to music, letting kids escape into tunes even when money was tight and record players were out of reach.
On BBC One, I wish you all a very good night.
Television wasn't an endless stream of entertainment. It had a hard stop every night. After a long evening of watching whatever was available on their few channels, the dreaded moment came, the station sign-off. The screen would display the American flag while the national anthem played, followed by a test pattern or pure static. That was the signal. It was officially time for bed. With no cable or late-night programming, the house would suddenly feel eerily quiet, leaving kids with nothing but their imaginations or the distant sound of a parent snoring. Unlike today's 24/7 media, TV had boundaries, and for poor kids, that static-filled screen marked the end of another day. With television shutting down in the late hours, what new home entertainment option kept kids occupied by bouncing a digital ball across a screen?
Go has it, the TV fun game with extra features for everyone, youngster or pro. There's automatic scoring, and not just one game, but 4.
Pong was often their first and maybe only experience with video games. This simple, two-dimensional game of bouncing a square ball between 2 paddles felt like futuristic magic. If a family was lucky enough to own an Atari console, it was usually a second-hand unit, hooked up to an aging TV with finicky dials. Friends would gather round, taking turns with the chunky controllers, mesmerized by the slow, hypnotic gameplay. For those who couldn't afford a console, playing Pong meant sneaking in turns at a friend's house or begging for a quarter at an arcade. It may have been basic by today's standards, but in the 70s, Pong was nothing short of revolutionary entertainment.
You are about to witness the most amazing man-made jewelry ever created. The original multicolor mood ring. This is the ring that senses your deepest feelings.
Mood rings were a fascinating but often out-of-reach trend. These little trinkets, with their color-changing magic, claimed to reveal emotions based on body temperature. Blue for calm, green for normal, and black for, well, probably a broken ring. Kids who couldn't afford the real thing found knockoff versions at gas stations or toy stores, though those often lost their moon-reading abilities fast. Some resorted to trading, borrowing, or begging parents for one as a rare treat. The novelty was irresistible, staring at the stone, trying to change colors, and showing off the results to friends. Even if they weren't always accurate, mood rings provided a tiny, mystical thrill in a world with few luxuries.
Usual, sir.
Please.
Even after 500 plays, our high-fidelity tape still delivers high fidelity.
Cassette tapes were both a blessing and a struggle. Unlike expensive vinyl records or bulky 8-tracks, cassettes were portable and relatively cheap, making them a go-to for music lovers on a budget. But finding the exact spot on a tape to replay a favorite song, that was a test of patience. With no skip button, rewinding or fast-forwarding meant holding down a clunky button, guessing when to stop, and sometimes overshooting the mark, only to start the process all over again. For those without fancy tape decks, a pencil was the ultimate tool, manually twisting the reels to save battery life. Whether making mixtapes from radio recordings or replaying a single song endlessly, cassettes were a poor kid's prized possession. For poor kids of the 70s, the hustle wasn't just a dance. It was a social event, a way to fit in, and a moment of pure joy that didn't cost a dime. Inspired by the disco craze, kids learned the twirls, glides, and spins from watching TV shows like Soul Train or copying older siblings who had mastered the moves. School dances, block parties, or even a simple living room with a record player became makeshift dance floors. With bell-bottom swaying and platform shoes or whatever hand-me-down sneakers were available tapping to the beat, the hustle turned any gathering into a party. For kids with little money but big energy, this dance was a way to shine without spending a cent. Disco dancing was fun, but what took it to the next level by adding wheels and flashing lights? Roller disco parties were the ultimate weekend escape, if they could get in. Skating rinks, with their flashing lights and thumping disco beats, felt like a dream world, but not everyone could afford the entry fee or a brand new pair of skates. Many kids relied on hand-me-down skates or borrowed a pair from a friend, wobbling onto the floor to the sound of the Bee Gees and Donna Summer. Some had to settle for makeshift driveway discos, skating on cracked sidewalks with a portable radio blasting the latest hits. Whether gliding smoothly or clumsily stumbling, the joy of moving to the music made everything else disappear, even if just for a few hours.
Attention shoppers, the new Atari cartridge game is in.
Excuse me. Uh-oh, George again.
For kids growing up poor in the 70s, owning an Atari video game console was the ultimate status symbol, a rare luxury that not every family could afford. Those lucky enough to have one usually got it secondhand, with a limited selection of cartridges that were played endlessly. The simple yet addictive games like Pong, Space Invaders, and Asteroids turned living rooms into makeshift arcades. The next best thing for kids without an Atari at home was finding a friend who had one, eagerly waiting for their turn to play. Some even resorted to creative methods, trading toys, doing chores, or begging for extra playtime. Whether you owned it or just wished for one, Atari represented a new era of home entertainment that felt futuristic and thrilling.
Suppose you want to dial 23650. Dial each numeral in this manner, pulling the dial around to the finger stop each time.
The family single rotary phone was both a lifeline and a source of frustration. Usually mounted on the kitchen wall or sitting on a small table, it had a long, tangled cord that barely stretched far enough for a private conversation. Calling a friend meant patiently dialing one slow, clicking number at a time. Mess up, and you had to start all over again. With only one phone in the house, kids had to wait their turn, as parents often hogged the line for important calls or older siblings whispered to their crushes. If a friend called, a strict parent might answer and interrogate them first. There was no call waiting or voicemail options. If the line was busy, you just had to try again later. Making a phone call took patience, but what TV-inspired fantasy had kids running in slow motion and making robotic sound effects?
Calling Steve Austin on Mars. Your radio signal's weak.
The new $6 Million Man with bionic grip and new Mission to Mars adventure set, sold separately.
Imagination was their best toy, and the $6 Million Man provided endless inspiration. Without expensive action figures or high-tech gadgets, kids became their own bionic heroes, running in exaggerated slow motion while making the ch-ch-ch sound effects, just like Steve Austin. Playground races became dramatic bionic sprints, and jumping off porches became superhero landings. Some even crafted makeshift bionic implants using tinfoil or cardboard, proudly showing off their cybernetic enhancements. Since most families couldn't afford fancy toys or costumes, pretending to be bionic was a free and thrilling way to feel superhuman. In a world where money was tight, a little slow motion running made kids feel like they could do anything.
Simon sets the pace. You follow right along. Light the lights that Simon lights, or he'll tell you that you're wrong.
Simon was the mesmerizing high-tech game that not everyone could afford, but everyone wanted to play. This electronic memory challenge featured 4 large colored buttons lit up in a sequence, requiring players to repeat the pattern correctly. Those lucky enough to own one became instant neighborhood favorites, with friends gathering around for a turn. For kids who didn't have their own Simon, playtime often meant visiting a friend's house or sneaking in a few rounds at a department store display model. The game's beeping sounds and flashing lights felt futuristic, making players feel like they were handling cutting-edge technology. Getting lost in Simon's hypnotic sequences was an unforgettable thrill, even when money was tight. Bell-bottom jeans weren't just fashion, they were a necessity, often worn until the fabric thinned and the hems frayed. With money too tight for frequent shopping trips, many kids relied on hand-me-downs or thrift store finds, sometimes rocking jeans that were a size too big or small. If the legs weren't flared enough, some kids' parents got creative, sewing in extra fabric panels to make them wider. Patching up holes with colorful embroidery or ironed-on decals became a style of its own, turning wear and tear into a fashion statement. Whether paired with a faded t-shirt or a hand-me-down polyester shirt, bell-bottoms were a must-have, even if they weren't exactly store-bought new. Outfits were bold and colorful, but one at-home accessory created a hypnotic, groovy vibe in many 1970s bedrooms.
We feel turned on to each other.
We turn on our lava light.
Cast a spell with products by Lava Simplex.
For kids growing up poor in the 70s, lava lamps were the ultimate symbol of cool, if they were lucky enough to have one. These hypnotic glowing lamps with their slow-moving blobs of colored wax felt like a piece of science fiction sitting on a bedroom nightstand. But for many kids, actually owning one was out of reach, so they admired them in stores, at a richer friend's house, or in the background of TV shows. Those who did manage to get one, often secondhand or as a rare gift, treated it like a treasure, watching the mesmerizing shapes swirl for hours. In a world without smartphones or endless entertainment, a lava lamp's soothing motion was a simple yet magical escape from everyday struggles.
Definitely a trend towards platforms for men.
Why?
I think men want to be taller than their women.
Platform shoes were the ultimate way to feel stylish if they could get their hands on a pair. With thick soles and bold designs, these towering shoes were all the rage, but buying them brand new wasn't always an option. Many kids relied on thrift stores, hand-me-downs, or even slightly oversized pairs borrowed from older siblings. Walking in them was a challenge. Ankles wobbled, and missteps led to some hilarious and painful falls. But the cool factor was worth the risk. Whether paired with bell-bottoms or as a flashy disco outfit, platforms made kids feel like they were stepping straight into a scene from Saturday Night Fever, even if they were just strutting down the block.
Presenting the incredible comfort beanbag chair. You can eat on it, sleep on it, talk on it, read on it.
A beanbag chair was often the closest thing to having their own comfy seat. These squishy, shapeless chairs fit anywhere, whether in a tiny bedroom, a cramped living room, or a shared space with siblings. If a family couldn't afford a brand new one, they might have a hand-me-down with flattened stuffing or even a homemade version filled with whatever soft material was available. Sitting in one meant sinking deep into a cozy, almost inescapable pit, perfect for watching Saturday morning cartoons or reading comic books. Over time, many bean bags developed leaks, leaving mysterious little foam beads scattered across the floor. But that didn't stop kids from flopping into them after a long day of play.
Today, waterbed devotees are said to comprise 10% of our sleeping California population.
A waterbed was the ultimate novelty, if they ever got to experience one. These wobbly, sloshing mattresses felt futuristic, but owning one was a rare luxury. Families who couldn't afford them sometimes got hand-me-down versions with slow leaks that had to be patched up constantly. Sleeping on a waterbed meant an unpredictable night. Every movement sent ripples across the mattress, making turning over feel like riding a tiny ocean wave. Some kids had fun just lying on one at a relative's house or sneaking a bounce on a neighbor's bed when visiting. Whether it was a status symbol or a secondhand splurge, a waterbed added a bit of excitement to an otherwise ordinary bedroom. Macrame decor was everywhere, whether they liked it or not. With its intricate knotted designs, macrame plant hangers dangled in front of windows, cradling photos or spider plants, while woven wall hangings added a boho touch to wood-paneled living rooms. Since buying fancy decoration wasn't an option for many families, macrame became a budget-friendly DIY trend, with moms and grandmothers knotting their own pieces using affordable rope or twine. Some kids even learned the craft in school art classes, bringing home lopsided keychains or uneven wall hangings as proud gifts for their parents. Whether handmade or store-bought, macrame gave even the most modest homes a touch of 1970s style and creativity.
Show your colors.
Tomorrow is not just the last day of classes,
but it's also the junior tie-dye day.
Wear your tie-dye and make your chem teacher proud.
Tie-dye shirts were a fun and affordable way to add color to their wardrobe. Since buying new clothes wasn't always an option, many kids and their parents turned old, faded t-shirts into psychedelic masterpieces, using cheap dye and rubber bands. Summer afternoons were spent dipping shirts into buckets of bright colors, anxiously waiting for them to dry before unraveling the swirls and patterns. No two designs were ever the same, making every shirt feel like a one-of-a-kind fashion statement. Some kids even wore their creations to school, proudly showing off their DIY skills. Whether made at home, in camp, or at a community event, tie-dye shirts were a groovy, budget-friendly trend that never went out of style. Kids dressed in their colorful creations, but what simple plastic toy had them spinning, twirling, and competing for hours?
Memo hula hoops are here. Just give it a spin and do lots of tricks. Round the neck's called Kill the Buzzard. Round your waist, the natural.
Hula hoops were the perfect toy, cheap, durable, and endlessly entertaining. Whether bought from a discount store or passed down from older siblings, these colorful plastic hoops provided hours of fun in backyards, playgrounds, and even living rooms. Mastering the art of keeping the hoop spinning around the waist was a rite of passage, but the real pros could twirl it around their arms, neck, or even ankles. Kids held impromptu competitions to see who could spin the longest, and some even tried rolling them like giant wheels down the street. With no batteries required and no rules to follow, hula hoops were a simple, budget-friendly way to bring joy to any child's day.
It's Slinky, for fun it's a wonderful toy. What walks downstairs alone or in pairs and makes a slinkity sound.
For kids growing up poor in the 1970s, a Slinky was one of the most fascinating yet frustrating toys they could own. When they worked properly, these coiled metal or plastic springs could walk downstairs with an almost magical motion. Many kids spent hours trying to get the perfect rhythm, cheering when the Slinky reached the bottom step without getting tangled. But in reality, most Slinkies ended up bent, twisted, or hopelessly knotted after just a few days of enthusiastic play. If a family couldn't afford to replace a damaged one, kids had to get creative, using the stretched-out toy as a pretend telephone cord or makeshift bracelet. Despite its short-lived perfection, a Slinky brought excitement to an otherwise ordinary afternoon.